The market had only been open for a few minutes. I placed the pages of my new system beside the keyboard and entered the ticker of the stock I had been watching. I went through the conditions I had written down one more time: the company, the price range, the trend, the level of risk, and the point where I would have to exit the position if things didn't go as planned. Nothing gave me a reason to change the plan, so I placed the buy order. After the order was filled, I watched the number on the screen for a moment, then turned back to the work waiting on my desk. This time felt very different from the decisions I had made before. I hadn't bought because I saw the price running up, and I hadn't bought because of something I had just heard from someone else. Everything I needed to check had already been written down before I made the decision. The price moved slightly higher during the session. The profit wasn't significant, but seeing the number in green made me look again at the pages beside me. The conditions I had spent days revising were now right there in front of me, and at least for the moment, the stock I had just bought was moving in the direction I had expected. I went back to work. When I checked the market again, the gain had narrowed, but the position was still green. I reviewed the conditions I had set and saw no reason to act. The stock was still within the range I could accept. The plan hadn't been broken. So I closed the market window and returned to what I had been working on. The next few sessions didn't move in the straight line I had imagined when testing the system against my old trades. One day, the price moved a little higher, then ended the session close to where I had bought it. Another day, it opened in the red, but buying pressure came in and gradually reduced the decline. The small profit disappeared, then appeared again. What reassured me was that every time I checked, the system still showed no sign that anything was wrong. When I got home after work, I changed clothes and sat down to rest. I picked up the phone from the table. My portfolio still showed the result from the session that had just ended. The stock had been slightly red in the morning, but by the close it had returned to around my entry price. I opened the notes I had saved on my phone and compared them with the plan. None of my selling conditions had appeared. I put the phone down, and the discomfort I had felt when I saw the price falling that morning eased with it. That weekend, I took my 2 children to the park. The 3 of us walked through the play area. They quickly ran toward the games they wanted to try, while I sat down on a nearby bench. While I waited, I took out my phone to check a few notifications and casually opened my portfolio. The stock was green again. The profit wasn't much, but just seeing that number made my decision to keep holding through the previous sessions feel right. One of the kids called out to me. I looked up, put the phone away, and walked over to them. The 3 of us continued to another play area, and the stock slipped out of my attention. A few more trading sessions passed. Then the price moved down again. At times, the profit disappeared completely. The position turned red, then recovered to around my entry price. Each time it happened, I went back to the conditions I had written down and checked them again. As long as the plan hadn't been broken, I kept my decision unchanged. One weekend, the whole family stopped by the supermarket. I pushed the cart behind them as everyone paused at one of the aisles. I took out my phone for a quick look and saw that the position was red. The decline wasn't large. I pulled up the chart, thought about the price range I had written into the plan, and put the phone back in my pocket. More things went into the cart. The family conversation moved from what we needed to buy to what we would have for dinner, and for the moment, the number I had just seen was left behind. By the end of the next trading session, the price had recovered part of the decline. Then it returned to around my entry price. Then it turned green again. Those movements continued over many days, finding their way into ordinary moments of my life. At the office, I checked the market between tasks. At home, I sometimes opened my phone to look at the final result of the session. When I took the kids out, or went somewhere with the family, one quick look at the portfolio was enough to see whether that small profit was still there, or had disappeared again. The price kept moving from green to red, back toward my entry price. Then green again. Each time the stock recovered after a decline, my confidence in what I had just built grew a little stronger. The market could fluctuate, but as long as the main conditions were still intact, I thought all I had to do was follow the plan. On my desk, the books that had once been left open all the time were now stacked more neatly. I no longer needed to search for a new principle after every small market move. The system already had an answer for most of the situations I encountered, and the stock still hadn't given me a reason to do anything differently. Until one session. The price opened much lower than it had on the previous days. I had just arrived at the office. I put my bag down and opened the market screen. The stock in my portfolio was already red. The decline was larger than the previous ones, but not enough for me to draw any conclusion yet. I pulled the pages closer, checked each condition, and kept watching. The price recovered slightly. I felt some relief, but the selling pressure quickly returned. Sell orders kept appearing, pushing the price below the range I had been watching throughout the previous session. The loss in my account grew faster than it had during those earlier dips, when the stock had only turned slightly red before recovering. I looked at the chart, then at the other stocks, then back at mine. It kept falling. I opened the company information again. There was no news that could immediately explain what I was seeing. I read through the conditions I had written down once more. It was still the same company I had researched. My reason for buying was still there, and my entry point was still within what the system allowed. But the price was going down. I pulled the chart back to the previous sessions. I found my entry area and watched the price move below it. Only one question remained in my mind. What had I missed? I went through the pages again from the beginning. Had I evaluated the company too highly? Was my entry point not as good as I thought? Or was there still something missing from the way I identified the trend? I looked at each condition I had written down, trying to find something that, if I had seen it earlier, might have changed this decision. But no answer was truly clear. The price fell again. The number in my account had now become a loss I could no longer dismiss as a small fluctuation. The confidence I had felt when I finished building the system began to disappear as I looked from the screen to the pages on my desk. I thought about the weeks I had spent reading books, the pages of notes, the old trades I had tested, the conditions I had revised until I could barely see any gaps left. Everything was still there. But the decision I had placed so much confidence in was moving in a completely different direction. If the system was incomplete, I could fix it. If one of the conditions was wrong, I could learn more. But another thought began to appear as I looked at everything I had prepared. What if I had spent all that time and still couldn't see what was wrong? I picked up my pen, then put it back down. The questions were no longer only about the stock. I remembered the colleague who had bought a stock that rose sharply, and the feeling I had when I saw his profit. Then came the books I had read, the things I thought I understood, and the confidence that had felt so clear only a short time ago. One decision that wasn't going as planned suddenly made all of those things feel smaller. I looked at the screen again. The stock was still red, but what bothered me most was no longer just the money I was losing. I began to wonder whether I really understood the market as well as I thought I did. If I had learned so much and could still make a decision like that, was what I knew really worth anything? If a system I had tested so carefully could still lead to this result? Had I been overestimating my own ability? That feeling followed me out of the office. On the way home, traffic was as heavy as usual. I stopped at a red light and looked at the cars ahead. Without meaning to, I thought again about the number in my account. The market had already closed. The price was no longer moving, but the feeling of failure was still traveling home. When I arrived, one of the kids ran over to tell me something that had happened at school. I listened and asked a few questions. Then we went inside together. Dinner went on as usual. Sometimes I laughed along with the family, but whenever a quiet moment appeared, the trade returned to my mind. It wasn't only because of the money I was losing. What disappointed me more was the feeling that the person I thought I had become might not be who I imagined. I had believed I understood more, that I was better prepared, that I had a better way of approaching the market. I thought I had come quite a long way from the person I used to be, but one sharp decline was enough to shake all of that confidence. Later, when the house had become quieter, I sat down at my desk and pulled the pages of my system toward me. There wasn't a single line on those pages saying I was a good investor, and there wasn't a single line saying I was a bad one just because the stock was losing money. And yet, when I looked at what I had written, the disappointment I felt in myself was clearer than the money I was losing. Where had I gone wrong? The question was still there, but behind it was something that bothered me much more. Was I really capable of doing this? I sat under the desk lamp, looking at the pages. For a moment, I just wanted to fold them up, push them aside, and stop thinking about the market. The weeks of reading, testing, revising, then revising again suddenly felt very far away from the confidence I had once felt while writing those words. My hand touched the top page. The conditions were still there. Company selection, entry point, capital management, exit point, the situations where I shouldn't enter a trade, and what I had to do if the decision went against my expectations. One losing trade didn't make those things disappear, but I couldn't pretend that what had just happened meant nothing either. I pulled my notebook closer and opened to a new page. If this decision was wrong, I would review it. If the system was still missing something, I would fix it. If I hadn't done well enough, I would have to do better. The pen remained in my hand. The disappointment was still there, but the urge to fold everything up and walk away had begun to fade. There were still people making money in this market. I had seen it right beside me. They weren't in a different market. They weren't looking at a different price screen. I looked at the blank page in front of me. If I'm always the one losing, then who is making money in this market?